I was again lost. And Jenny, my wife, said, "Hey, you should come try this thing. I'm doing this thing. I'm doing CrossFit, and you should check it out." And I was like, "No, I don't think so. I don't really like classes. I don't like to be told what to do." But that was the beginning of this adventure.
This is episode number 40 with our guest, David Mendenhall. Welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Julie Fouché, medical student and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring to you information and inspiration from experts and everyday individuals for how to use lifestyle to maximize health. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. This week, we meet our guest, David Mendenhall, who is a 47-year-old husband, father, middle school teacher, and a relatively recent but rabid CrossFit convert. He's a lifelong downhill skier and outdoor enthusiast. His adult training and fitness exploits prior to his introduction to CrossFit in 2013 involved martial arts, a personal yoga practice, distance running, triathlon competitions, and even a semi-extreme cycling stint. After hanging up his cycling helmet in the fall of 2012 for an indefinite hiatus due to some severe arthritis in both of his knees, his wife introduced him to Beau Teal at CrossFit Burlington. In this episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with David to discuss his background, his transition from single modality sports to CrossFit, and how he has used CrossFit to prepare him for 2 total knee replacements in the past year. Before we get started, I have a few quick reminders. First, if you're enjoying the podcast, please head over to iTunes to subscribe and consider giving it a 5-star rating. You can also head to my website, juliefouché.com. There you can enter your emails to stay in the loop with the podcast and everything else I'm doing with my bi-weekly newsletter. I'm also always looking for inspiring stories to share, just like David's. If you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please send your story to me at info@juliefouché.com, and I'll select some to share here on future episodes. If you're interested in training with me, check out my program through Beyond the Whiteboard. This is the actual training that I do now, 5 days per week, an hour per day, and it's scheduled out for you minute by minute from warm up to cool down. We also have a Train on the Go program that's perfect for helping you get your workouts in when you're on vacation or just during a busy week at home. For more information or to try the programs out yourself, visit beyondthewhiteboard.com/juliefouché. Also, please remember that although I'm nearing graduation from medical school, this podcast is meant to share the experiences of individuals and does not provide medical advice. So with that, let's get started here with episode number 40 of Pursuing Health featuring David Mendenhall. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. I am very excited to be here with David Mendenhall, who has an exciting health story that I'm excited to share with all of you. So welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's really an honor, actually. So
excited to
it's
have
been
you
fun
here.
to watch. Yeah, it's been fun to watch you since I've been involved in CrossFit.
Oh.
So you've been sort of our hero to all of us at my house and my gym. So it's pretty special to be here.
Wow. Well, thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah.
So I was hoping we could start out with just a little bit of your background,
Sure.
What sort of sports you were involved in growing up, or your athletic background, kind of early on.
Sure. So let's see. I think I was always pretty active as a kid. Typical, I suppose, childhood. My family, we grew up in Western Michigan.
Okay.
Or I grew up in Western Michigan, and that's where I'm from. And I would say, I played all the regular sports as a kid. Basketball, soccer, football, baseball, all that stuff. But then I think fairly early on I developed an interest in more solo type stuff. So I was always also a runner, and then I was a big water skier.
Oh,
so my
fun.
family had a camp in northern Michigan.
Where
and so
at?
I spent so near Traverse City. It's probably
okay.
the biggest city to know up there.
Yeah.
But then Frankfurt is more along where we were.
Okay.
And there's a little inlet lake, just in Lake Michigan. The big lake was right next to us. There's like a peninsula, and then a little lake was inside. So it was a great place to water ski all summer long. And then in the winters I would ski, downhill, alpine skiing, cross country skiing. And then again, in high school, I always played sports, but I wouldn't say I was like super serious about team sports.
Okay.
It was more just like the individual stuff. So I was always drawn to activity, but not probably in the team manner. Like I always did something and played varsity sports, but was never like the hero or the star or anything like that. And then probably, I guess it would have been my junior year of high school. That summer I went out west and I did an outward bound course.
Oh, fun.
And that was pretty formative for me. So we were out in the southern Rockies, southern Colorado for about 3 weeks, doing a lot of the 10,000 peaks. And that changed a lot of, I think, my perspective on things. And so that drew me then to go out west for college. So I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder. And that is a pretty cool place in terms of just athletics, right? So a lot of interesting people out there. And again, it was just sort of a hodgepodge collection. I actually went out there to ski. You know, I like to bump ski. And when I got out there, I met my eventual wife and found out that I really wasn't as good a skier as I thought I was. And she was really quite excellent. And so I chased her around quite a bit.
Okay.
And then the second year I was out there, I actually rearranged my schedule so I could ski 4 days a week and then just do classes 2 days a week.
Wow.
And, so that was a big part of my college years. But then I was also dabbling in a lot of rock climbing and mountain biking and things like that. And so then after college, it was other stuff. Continued to ski for sure, but skiing evolved into tele-skiing and snowboarding and some backcountry stuff. And then a lot of, martial arts, which I can talk about later because that's really what led to my knee replacements eventually.
Okay.
And then, again, a lot of cycling, a lot of mountain biking that turned into other stuff. So that became more in my adult years. But my younger years were just, I think, just constantly being active. I dabbled in, weightlifting here and there. I think like a lot of guys do growing up. But I would say I was never committed to any one thing. But it was always sort of this, if I think back on it, this pursuit of sort of almost like a grind mentality. I just like to move and be out and about. Yeah, and I like being outside a lot. That was a big deal, I think, and that's what drew me out west.
Right. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan also, and going up to, not the UP, but northern Michigan a lot to ski when I was younger, and that was also a big part of my life growing up in water skiing, but definitely not the same as being out west.
Yeah.
A lot smaller hills in Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. Like once you get out west, it is different, but you learn a lot skiing in Michigan.
Oh yeah.
You learn how to ski on ice and in the real cold. You learn to be on rope tows and T-bars, which are really interesting, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a bit of acrobatics in and of itself.
Totally. And I grew up going to a really small family-oriented resort, so it was nice. We could, even as kids, we could ski around and be totally free, and our parents wouldn't worry about us or like hurting ourselves or doing anything too crazy. It was called Otsego Club. It's in Gaylord, Michigan.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. So I grew up in we skied a lot at Caberfay, which was in Cadillac, Michigan. Yeah. It was like it felt like it was something where they plowed a bunch of earth up, and then when it snowed, that's what you skied on. Know. Yeah.
Yeah. There is skiing in Michigan, that's for sure.
There is skiing in Michigan. Yeah.
So you obviously are very active, very involved in different outdoors and sort of adventure sports. And then you talk about how your body went through some chronic degradation up until you got to this point. So can you sort of take us through what happened during that time? Yeah,
sure. So what happened, I think, when I got out of college is my wife and I moved to Vermont. And I had planned on staying out west. I just thought it was the stuff. And I was still living in Boulder. I went to graduate school. And I would say in graduate school, I was working full time. And I was getting my master's degree in education. And I think that I let myself get a little bit out of shape. would be accurate, right?
Sounds like a lot of time with your studies and working.
Yeah, right. And so when we moved to Vermont, I kind of got back into things. I was snowboarding here because I wanted to try something different, because Vermont is different from Michigan, is different from out west. And so, the terrain and the conditions. So I got into snowboarding, and that was helpful for a while. And we were doing a lot of backcountry stuff, which was fun. And then we started having kids. So I have a son and a daughter, and my son's a junior now, and my daughter is a freshman in college.
Oh, wow.
But when that happened, my wife also decided to go back to school.
Okay.
So she was like, all right, it's time for me to do something different. So she went back to school to be a physical therapist.
Wow.
So again, things got really busy, and I would say I got a little bit out of shape again. And when my kids were really little, I got into Aikido.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so I wanted to do something that was active, but it was something I had done as a kid. I had done martial arts as a kid. I'd done some Aikido, done some Taekwondo and stuff. And I thought, oh, this would be kind of cool. And I got really into it. So I was heavy into it. I started, maybe 2 days a week, then 3 days a week, then every night I was there. But the thing was, I was doing all the Aikido, but I don't think I was doing any real training to be on the mat. And so I think what really happened to me was I was this guy, I'm only like 5'10", and I was carrying around probably 195, almost 200 pounds, and being thrown and throwing a lot. And during that time, during that 4 years where it was really pretty intensive, I underwent 3 meniscectomies on my knees.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and the second one on my left knee was a bucket tear. And I think really at that time, most of the meniscus was taken out. And so I stopped doing Aikido, and I was looking for other things to do. And I started doing some yoga and some other things, and I realized, what's really the problem is I'm just overweight. My nutrition's off. It's just I'm not where I need to be. There was a shift between, I don't know, when I was 27 and then like 31, right? So at that time I changed all my eating habits, I would say.
Okay.
And then I started running, which is a weird thing to pursue, I suppose, with knee problems. But it's something I knew from college and from when I was a kid. So I started doing that. And, first it was like, okay, let's just start small. We'll go for a 5K, and then we'll go for a 10K. And then I did a couple marathons.
Wow.
And then I thought, all right, well, I want to do something bigger. Because like I said before, I was into the grind sort of thing. Like I like doing stuff solo, and I wasn't fast, but I could go for a long time. So I started doing like 30-mile runs on my own, and I was thinking, yeah, I want to do like ultra stuff. Well, that did not work with my knees. That was really a very poor choice on my part. And I remember my PA at the time saying, so who told you this would be like a good idea, And I think it had the effect that I lost the weight, and I sort of got the bug again, the fitness bug, and thinking about my nutrition and thinking I was in shape, but I don't think it was a healthy choice for me. I mean, I'm a pretty lean guy typically, and I'm a thin guy, and so it seems like naturally running would work. But not for my condition. So then I picked up not so much distance running. I got into triathlons.
Okay.
And so then I started doing, and I was naturally a pretty good swimmer just from when I was a kid, always spending the time in the water. That was easy. I got into cycling again. That was fun. And then the runs were just, bearable. And so I did that for a few years, and then I said, I just can't run anymore. I remember my PA said, this isn't good. I think you should stop. And I remember at that moment, that was a heartbreaking moment for me. I thought I'd lost something really major in my life. I remember feeling incredibly, I think, sad, borderline sort of depressed as people get when you have to really give something up that you're passionate about.
Right.
And so I was looking for something. So I threw my entire being then into cycling. Okay. And I was just riding all the time. So I'm a school teacher. So I started riding to work. My wife suggested, hey, why don't you just do this? And I said, okay. But my work was like 15 miles away.
It's a long ride.
It was a long ride, right? So I started riding, and I got really into that. And then after a couple of years of dabbling in it, I decided to just ride year round. And so I got a couple different bikes. And here in Vermont, it definitely gets icy and snowy and cold and dark. And for about 2.5, 3 years, I was riding every single day.
Wow.
And it was a pretty crazy experience. You know, I'd ride in, I think the coldest ride I did was probably just about 30 below.
Wow.
I remember one ride I did. I mean, I didn't miss many days. I was riding, you know, hundreds of miles a week. And I remember one ride I did, it took me on the way home to do those 15 miles. It took me 3 hours.
Wow.
Because the snow was crazy. And I had to, like, you know, carry my bike on my back and stuff. And so I thought, all right, this is kind of cool. This is adventurous. But then my wife and I had sort of a meeting of the minds. And she was like, you know what? I know that we talked about this, but we also have small kids.
Right.
And I need you to be around. and there was a moment where I was just like, because I'd gotten in a couple accidents.
Okay.
And I'd been hit by a car, and I'd hit the car, and people were yelling, and it was getting kind of crazy. And I stopped. I was just like cold turkey. And I think I realized at that moment that it was also with my kids. You know, we were doing other things on the weekend, but my knees had gotten so bad that I could only really cycle. And so I wasn't skiing with them. I wasn't doing stuff with them. I wasn't hiking anymore. I was just cycling. And I realized I was also spending all this time alone. So I was spending probably, 4 hours a day riding. And, then you're working and then all that other stuff. And so I just gave it up. And at that moment, I was, again, lost. And Jenny, my wife, said, hey, you should come try this thing. I'm doing this thing. I'm doing CrossFit. And you should check it out. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't really like classes. I don't like to be told what to do. But that was the beginning of this adventure. So that was like I think it's 2013 or something like that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to hear how you sort of were always focused on one thing, where maybe it was the running, and then it was the martial arts, and then the cycling, but hadn't really had much variety, I guess, except maybe for the triathlons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I get a little bit obsessive with my activity, but definitely it's more singular. And I think I realized right away going into CrossFit, whereas like I think a lot of people do, I realized I was not a complete athlete. But like people I think would look at me, and I was, at that point I had dropped down to, I told you before, I was like about 200 pounds when I was doing Aikido. While I was cycling, I had dropped down to about 160.
Oh, wow.
So I was really skinny. I would say frail. I could do pull-ups, but not many. I certainly couldn't lift a lot of weight. I could do push-ups, but, it wasn't, I thought I was in pretty good shape because I could do all this riding and stuff. But I had become, I think, what Coach Glassman would call like a fringe athlete, right? So I was kind of like a rubber band stretched too thin. And I remember the first days going into the gym, I could keep up on, cardio stuff, but really nothing else. And so that was kind of the next good challenge. That was cool.
And can you talk about what kind of pain or discomfort were you in when you were trying to did you experience any just in your everyday activities, or you talked about not really being able to go skiing or hiking with your kids?
Yeah. So I think what happened was, the knees, you have a couple different kinds of cartilage in there, right? So you have the meniscus, which is like the pad between the joints. And then you have that hyaline cartilage, which covers the bone. And it's kind of that slit covering. And then you have, of course, your ligaments, which are holding everything together, like the MCL and the ACL. And I think what was happening over time with my knees is the meniscus had kind of disappeared or been taken out. And that had caused, with all the activity, the hyaline cartilage over the bone to wear away. And then my, I don't know if this is really just sort of genetic or from the activity, but my ACLs were giving way, right? So I was really unstable, and just always my bones were on each other. And so what had happened was I could do the cycling, but I couldn't do things like ski because of the quick change of motion, and I couldn't, and I could do things that were sort of static, but nothing that would require like quick change. And I also think that my musculature was into such a sort of limited pattern. I think in CrossFit we talk a lot about range of motion and full range of motion and, multiple joint movements and things like that. And those activities had not helped me with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that had brought me to a place of very limited activity. So there was pain just really kind of moving around.
Mm-hmm.
When I ran, that was sort of a no-go. So I couldn't run around with my kids as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a bummer, and I was continuing to try to do it. I was continuing to try to fight that. So like, I would still go for runs. There is a big forest behind the school where I teach,
mm-hmm.
and these trails. So I would go out there and I would run in the hills, and it would hurt like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd try to like climb trees and do pull-ups. And I was kind of into the, do you know Erwin LaCour, who does like the Move Nat stuff?
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was I was starting to read about that, and I was like, oh, I'll try this. This looks cool. I'll pick up rocks. I'll do anything. And I think that's where Jenny thought, why don't you just come to the gym
mm-hmm.
and see what you think? And so that's where I started that. But the discomfort was really starting to keep me from doing this other stuff.
Right.
So then the question was like, well, how is CrossFit going to be different? And it really was. So I could talk more about that too if you'd like. But
yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear you say that about cycling or about being sort of limited in your movements, because I had
mm-hmm.
Chris Hinshaw on one of my early episodes, who was an Ironman athlete, and he experienced a lot of the same things after his Ironman career was over, just having trouble warming up or getting out of bed or being able to do simple things because he was so used to following the same movement patterns over and over and over again. And then once he started CrossFit, he was able to kind of balance out some of that musculature.
Yeah, I love listening to him. I think I probably listened to him on your podcast. I think I listened to him I think he was on Barbell Shrugged. Mm-hmm. I've listened to several interviews with Chris. He's a super interesting guy.
Yeah.
He knows a lot of stuff.
Definitely. His seminar is awesome.
Yeah.
So can you talk about then your experience starting CrossFit and what sort of things you started to notice as you got into it?
Yeah, for sure. So when I first started, I was like nervous about certain things. So I was nervous about like box jumps, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, I don't know how that's going to go. Change of direction. So the box where I go, we'll often do like agility work, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll do agility sort of, sometimes we'll set up almost like an obstacle course work inside the box, inside the gym. And so we'll do that, and I was nervous about that. Just basic stuff. I was like, I'm not sure how that's going to go. But what happened is when I got in there and we started doing things, especially I would say like full range of motion with it doesn't matter really what I name, but I'll just name basic foundational movements, like whether it's like squatting, and really getting a full squat. Like I thought my legs were strong from cycling, and they were, but only to a certain degree. And certainly just going parallel with a squat was pretty difficult for me. But then when we started moving to places like below parallel, I was like, whoa, that is way different. And I'm certainly not strong in that place, right? And at first it was a little bit creaky on my knees. But the thing about arthritis, which is what I had also developed, I mean, my joints were so close together. I mean, when I was going to get my Euflexis shots, which is sort of like a lubricant, my cortisone shots to abate the swelling. I mean, they're having trouble getting the needles in anymore just because the joint there was no space in the joint. And so I think what CrossFit did was it started. Well, I was willing to commit, but it started forcing me to go to those places. And I think one of the things that's key when you have arthritis like that is to keep moving. So I actually started feeling better. And I also started developing musculature that I hadn't had before. And that musculature was around that full range of motion. And so my hamstrings and my glutes and my quads and all those things were developing. Now I had, huge calf muscles from cycling, but those weren't really doing me much good. And so all this other stuff was starting to happen and starting to get balanced out. And so that range of motion, it was like a palliative for what was happening to my body. And I think what it did was it started to stave off what was the inevitable, which was the knee replacements. That was going to happen. But I started feeling much better and doing things like box jumps. So then eventually, after I'd been there for a while, you go to the 16-inch and then you do the 20 and then 24. And then I was doing the 30-inch box jumps and workouts. And, I wasn't like super fast on the runs. I would definitely, that had changed for me, but I was able to do it. And sometimes would sub in rowing when things got bad. That comes later, but I got stronger. And I think the the knees got more stable. Like my ACLs had definitely given, but what was happening was I was developing musculature that was stabilizing the joints, and so that was really helpful. The other things that were happening was my overall sort of performance as an athlete was improving because I was getting stronger in places I hadn't been strong. My arms, my shoulders, my lats, my back, and those things. So I came in like pretty weak as an athlete, like an all-around athlete, and I would rely on things, because I think everybody has a little bit of an ego. I certainly do. And I went in, I was like, oh God, I'm so small, and these people are so big, and but I would win, I could win on the row,
right,
and other things like that. And I was like, okay. And then my pull-ups started getting better, my push-ups and stuff like that. But then as your whole body gets stronger, I think everything gets dialed in and more balanced. But certainly the musculature around the joint, building that was super helpful, and the full range of motion was incredible. So that was awesome.
I love that you said that, because I think that's something that I see so often in med school and in the clinics that I've been in, where patients start to get pain or they start to get arthritis, and they think that they can't exercise at all because it's too painful. And I think you made a couple of really good points that, number one, a lot of times those pains will get better once you start to balance your musculature around the joint and do the full range of motion. And then two, even, if you still have pain and it's something that you can't get to the full range of motion, you can still benefit from doing modified exercises or doing something that's still keeping your body healthy. Maybe if you have one area that's injured.
Absolutely. I think it's imperative. I think what happens is they stop because of the pain, but the pain only increases with inactivity.
Right.
And that's the thing. You sort of have to, there's this fine line you have to push through, I think, or at least I certainly do, because otherwise I go a little bit stir crazy as well. And I'd gotten to that point where I wasn't willing. There was that, like I said, there was that short period where I just was inactive, and that was unpleasant for me, because the rest of my life I had been active. And so I wasn't willing to go back to that. But I think there's this fine line, too, of okay, so I'm already injured, and you certainly don't want to push. I'm listening and reading and studying a lot of people. Christopher Summer is a really interesting guy right now who's doing a lot of interviews and doing a lot online and writing a lot. And he's talking about the gymnastic stuff and really strengthening the tendons and not working through injury. And so I'm paying attention to that as an athlete and a coach, too. So you don't want to push through injury that's not going to be, I think, or that's going to become chronic. But for me, I was already damaged goods. And so I was actually looking at it as a healing or a way station before I actually needed to have this surgery. And that's really helpful. There's not going to be a cure for arthritis, but you can work through it, and you need to if you don't want it to get worse. And I think that was really true for me.
Wow. So then eventually you got to the point where you said the knee replacements were inevitable, but how did you know it was time for those? And then what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so that was a dark time, I think. that was bad. So, and I'm not a stranger to surgery. It's actually it's so funny because for me, in my family and in my friends, in my circles, I think people sometimes are surprised at how many times I've been in the hospital and had surgeries, since I was a kid. I was in a terrible car accident when I was 17. I was in the hospital for 3 months.
Wow.
I mean, I was in there for a month, but then I was in and out, and I was homebound for most of my senior year.
Wow.
And then, I've had a hernia repair. I've had a chilectomy on my toe. I've had these other knee surgeries before. So it's I'm not a stranger to it, and so I wasn't afraid of it. But there was this moment, and I remember it was in December, and so I've had my left knee. It's going to be just about a year now, and it's 2016, so that would have been 2015 in November.
Okay.
So it must have been December of 2014. And I went in to see my PA, with whom I'd worked for over a decade, working with my pain. And she had always been telling me she's an amazing woman. She's incredible. She's in her 60s. She's a world-class triathlete. I mean, she's unbelievable. And she is crazy fit. She is a strong, strong woman. And so she knew what it was like to go through this kind of thing and try to continue being, athletic. And she's like, David, you'll know, and we'll sort of decide together. And I remember that December going in to see her, and she even said, she's like, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get the needle in anymore. You're in, you fought the good fight, but you're just in like pain all the time. I was.
Right.
Like I couldn't. The only thing I could do at that point was CrossFit. Like, so what I would do is I would teach all day, but I was kind of like hobble around, right? and I'd go to the gym, and I'd work out, and I felt really good working out, so I'd work out as often as I could. Like in the summer, because I'm a teacher, I have another gig that I do. I teach at a local college, and I teach in their master's program. So I would do that, but then as often as I could, I'd be at the gym. So I'd like work out 2 or 3 times a day, and the reason is when I did that, I felt good. But then after that, I couldn't get up from the dinner table, and it wasn't because of the working out. It was just like, that's where I was. And when I worked out, things would warm up, things would loosen up, and I was trying to, stay strong or whatever. But there was this moment where she was just like, it's time. And it was, I couldn't move without limping or without pain. And what I had said to my students too, and the people I worked with, is like, if I hadn't had this done, really what you would see is me walking around with a cane. And that's just unacceptable. I mean, there's this other option. And so when she told me that, I was like, okay. And I started looking. She gave me the names of several surgeons, and I started looking around and sort of started interviewing and sort of, checking out what the deal was. And I found this guy that did total knees on. He worked for USA Snowboarding, USA Skiing. He was all over the world doing different, work with athletes. And I was like, I think that's the guy. And I had friends who had good luck with him. And so I set up an appointment with him. But like I was just reviewing some of the literature this morning. Like there are so many people now getting knee replacements, right? And because the age has dropped. It used to be they wouldn't do it until you were past the age of 50 because they were not sure how the joint would last. And that's something else I'd love to talk about actually in a little bit, and how CrossFit is helpful for that. And I wish they would do more. I wish that I were a guinea pig. I wish people would like study me, because I think there's something to be learned, not because I'm like, some unusual anomaly, but because I am this regular person who's really committed to making this work. And with that, I do a lot of things that maybe people haven't done or have been told not to do, but I think would be helpful. But anyway, so I found this guy, but he's really popular because he's really good. So it took a long time to even be seen. And I remember during that time, I went and it was awful. It was so stupid. I was doing all this work, and so people were like, God, you're so crazy about CrossFit, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're so fit, and you're so strong. Well, then I took my 8th graders on a trip to Washington, D.C., chaperoning, right? And I remember going into the Museum of Native American History, and I was up near the restrooms because I was calling the surgeon's office begging, and I wasn't really walking. Like I was still able to do things once I broke through the pain in a workout. And once I got warmed up, but I wasn't able to live my life. I wasn't able to use my fitness in any way, shape, or form. So I was still doing things. I was still doing the workouts. And it was uncomfortable to do that at times, but I couldn't live. I wasn't living my life.
So it was time.
And it was time. And I think the question always is, well, if you weren't doing all these things, would your knees have lasted longer? And my response is absolutely not. I think that I would have been incapacitated much earlier, because I would have been doing what you suggested earlier, that sometimes people do, is they fall into this trap where they have arthritis and they start to become inactive. They become inert. They become sedentary. When you become sedentary, you become your bone density depletes. Your bones become porous, so you become much more brittle and much weaker, and I think that's a huge problem. And so for me, this staved off what was inevitable from this traumatic injury early on, and actually gave me inspiration. So then I got booked. I went and I saw this guy, and he's like, "Yep, that is no good. That knee is done, right?" And that was my left knee. so this was so strange. And I said, so my right knee is also troubling. He's like, yep, what we're going to do is we're going to do X, Y, Z, blah, 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 and we're going to scope that right knee and we'll check it out. It's like, awesome. So we booked the surgery, and the way they do it now, the way he does it is he works with a company called Conformis, and they do all the CT scans and the CAT scans and whatever scans they're doing in the femur x-rays and this x-ray, and they get all the measurements dialed in. And they send it out to a company. I think they did it in California. I don't know, but they 3D print the thing, right?
Wow.
Yeah, in titanium. So it's this like awesome knee that is conformed to your body. It's like your knee, but in metal. And so awesome. So that takes a certain amount of time. So then I had that done in November, and they scoped my knee on the right side. And I remember waking up from the surgery, and he's like, it went awesome. It was great. Everything is really good. But they encountered this problem. And this is, again, kudos to CrossFit and just committing to that. That I was in I think, like, I'm not going to tell you that this is, actually what he said, but I'm pretty sure that I was in the operating room like an hour longer than I should have been. And the reason is they couldn't cut through my bone. So it was too dense. So that was unusual. They didn't, it was like they hadn't encountered that before. So what did that come from? It came from all that preparation. So from all the deadlifting, all the squatting, all, the weight resistant movements, right? And so what does that mean? It means that when they cut it and then drilled and then put that joint in, as I continue, first of all, their fixatives are better now, right? So the glues. But what it means is now that bone is solid. And so that joint, as long as I'm active, right, that joint is not going anywhere. So typically what happens in knee replacement failures is it's not necessarily the joint that fails. Like, you'll read all this speculation, I think, online on the internet and stuff that, okay, there is wear and tear on the artificial meniscus, sure, and on the surface of the joint, the articulation and things like that, fine. But what really is primarily happening in knee failures is the joint itself pops out of the bone, right? So the fixative comes loose, or the joint comes loose from the bone. Well, what does that come from? My supposition is it comes from porous bone. And so there's this really interesting study done. It was a 7-year study in the early 2000s of patients who did what their surgeon said and patients who did not do what their surgeon said.
Okay.
And the patients who did not do what their surgeon said with knee surgeries, right? Meaning they went back to sport and they went back to lifting weights and they went back to sort of resistance activity. They actually fared better because what happens is their knees grew around the joint and the joint set into their bones. And so they were stronger as a result of it. So anyway, that's my belief, and that's why I'm like so into, okay, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this stuff. And so my preparation before had paid off because I was deadlifting a ton before I went in because I couldn't bend as much at that point. So I was just deadlifting like crazy and doing other stuff. So I think I was prepped. And then afterwards, right back at it. But the bad news that came out was when they scoped my other knee, they were like, that one's a no-go. Your ACL's done, and there's no meniscus left, and the hyaline cartilage is also not so good. And so then we booked the other one. This surgeon, and I think nowadays with younger patients, they don't do the bilateral knee replacements. I think the healing isn't quite as sound, so they like to go 6 months apart or more.
Okay.
So then I booked the other one, and I just had the other one done about 15 weeks ago.
Wow, so
that's
still pretty new.
Now.
Yeah.
Still pretty new, but like I'm talking to you right now from just doing like a crazy awesome workout. Like I've been hitting the gym, I'm back to coaching, I'm doing all that stuff. And what was so awesome tonight was I was racing my son. So my son is 16, and he is getting huge, right? And so he's stronger, faster, bigger than I am, right?
Yeah.
And he loves it, of course. And my excuse is, well, hello, 2 fake knees, 1 pretty new. And so tonight we're racing, and it was awesome. It's a baseline workout. So it's a 500-meter row. into 40 squats, right, which I'm now able to do again, just body weight, 30 sit-ups, 20 push-ups, 10 pull-ups, fast as you can.
I love that. That was one of my first CrossFit workouts.
That's the best, right?
It's a good one, yeah.
So I knew I wasn't going to PR. I knew that. But there's my son, and he's like eyeballing me, and we're in the same heat. So he's there, and then my buddies are there. So the four of us are in this chaos, just madness. He's next to me. He's pulling like a 127 on the rower. I'm like, he is not going to be able to hold that. That is no way. He's good, but he's not that good. So I'm like holding my own, and he gets off the rower, but he's smoked. So then I get off the rower, and we're starting doing our squats, and the coach is like, Simon, stand up. He's not opening his hips, and all this stuff is going on. We come off the pull-up bar exact same time. It was the greatest moment. It was so fun.
So cool. Wow.
Yeah, that's another piece of the power of CrossFit. It's like my whole family does it,
right,
and we can go there and have such good fun. But anyway, so I'm back
amazing.
at it now.
I love it. And I love what you said about the surgery too. So I did this year during my surgery rotation, I did 2 weeks on orthopedic surgery, and majority of what I saw was was total knee replacements. But in that situation, it was mostly patients who were overweight, who hadn't been working out, whose injuries and arthritis had come from inactivity and being overweight. Yeah. And it's very difficult. Number one, the surgery is much more difficult because the bones aren't healthy. There's so much inflammation around the knee. And then also the recovery is so much more difficult, I think, for those people. So again, to your point of all that preparation that you do before surgery and how valuable that can be for the procedure, but then also for the recovery.
I think that's it. Like it's hard because for me, my awakening came kind of earlier. So I was starting to think about my nutrition and so forth way before this, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had come to this, but if people really, if they want to make that change, you do have to prepare. Mm-hmm. So like for me, for my second knee surgery, I knew it was coming, right? So I did a ketogenic diet, and not only ketogenic, but also intermittent fasting.
Okay.
So before my second knee surgery, so I had gained weight again, and this wasn't like my other weight. This was like CrossFit weight, so it was more muscular weight, right? So I had gone back up to about 185. And I would like to say it was mostly muscle, maybe not all, but mostly. So then, but before my second knee surgery, I dropped it to 170. So I did this intermittent fasting and I did this ketogenic diet. And the whole reason was I knew I was going to lose some muscle mass and maybe some lean muscle. But the idea was I knew I wouldn't lose all of it. And I knew I'd also be 15 pounds lighter coming out of the other end of the surgery. So I built up all that stuff. And I did that in like 2 weeks, 2 weeks before the surgery. And so I had built up and trying to get strong again, but then dropped the weight so that once I came out of the operating room, I was that much lighter and I could recover. And I went home. I don't know what your experience is, but I went in on a Monday, and my surgery was Monday morning or Monday afternoon. I went home on Tuesday night, and I used crutches maybe for a day, and then I used cane for maybe another day, but that was it. And I was just walking.
Wow.
And I was doing like, much to the chagrin of my wife, I'd be doing like handstands and crawls and anything I could do. And trying, again, being careful not to create more inflammation. And of course, there's a lot of pain.
Right.
You're on a lot of meds, but not endangering it, but doing stuff that I could do right away, So I think you do have to get in that mentality. And I think what happens is they get to that place where I've seen several people in my school who have had also knee replacements and not been fit. But those are going to be the knee replacements that aren't as successful. Because I think they're still carrying that problem. They're still carrying too much weight. And but it's not the right kind of weight. It's not like resistance weight. It's not like you're training the bone to be better. And you're compromising the joint because you're putting it into awkward situations, awkward positions. I think precarious situations. But that's a whole other thing. I mean, that's like why CrossFit I think is so important, is to bring the general population into a better understanding of fitness and nutrition and get a little bit more healthy. And then maybe you go in for the knee replacement.
Right.
You know, the knee replacement's not going to fix all your problems. I mean, it will alleviate the pain, but I don't know. I don't want to speak against it because people do what they can do in life, you know.
Right.
But I think if you're like what you witnessed, you can be more successful if you make some more significant change. Because, I mean, really, when you think about it, getting part of your body cut out and replaced with something, that's a pretty dramatic change.
It's a big deal. Very traumatic.
Yeah. So if you're going to make change in your life, probably that is the time to do it.
Absolutely. I also saw that you have done some competitions, maybe a local, like a master's competition, and you've also been doing the Open for a couple of years. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah. So I've been doing the Open the last couple of years, but haven't been registered. So I do all the workouts with everybody, but I just felt like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. So I didn't really sign up. But this master's competition, it was the last one I was really able to do. It was this fun thing in Milford. And they have some amazing people down there. I mean, it was really intimidating. It was weird. Like, we went down there and I went with a buddy of mine. He's like, hey, Dave, do you want to do this? And I said, sure, why not? I didn't know any better. And so it was 2 men, 2 women. And we went down there. And again, I was like, wow, I am really small. And these people are really big. But it was fun. We went down and we were in the Masters division. So that was a little bit more palatable again. We weren't cleaning most weight, that's for sure, but we held our own on, like, the assault bikes were coming out at that point, so we could do that. There was some stuff with rowing, the body weight stuff, that's where we started to come back. So in that competition, that was pretty cool. So we went down there and I got to see people who were like games type athletes. I think they were games athletes more like on team. They weren't like your caliber. It wasn't like individual competitors that were there, but people who had competed in the games on teams who were pretty awesome. And so they were in teams on there. So that was one category. There was like elite, and then there was like sport, and then there was like gen pop, and then there was masters. And so it was just cool because we got to be down there with all these amazing people. And I kind of felt like we were kind of in the mix. It was really fun. And so we got 3rd place in that. We kind of caught up at the end because the end was, it was like chipper style kind of body weight stuff that was really fun. I mean, not all body weight, some barbell, but it was more like, can you hang on for a long time? And we did. And so that was pretty cool. We clawed our way back from not being able to lift the amounts of weight that they were to coming back. So that was fun. And the Open is always a good experience because for me, my goal this year is to be able to do it again. So my goal this year is to be able to get through it. Usually I have been able to do it RX, although it's been getting harder, I think. And so hopefully if I don't know. We'll see. The weights have been getting pretty heavy, so if I can get back to where I was, I think I'd be able to do it. But we'll see. That's my goal. And it's always been a challenge because, like, when I first got into CrossFit, I remember I signed up for the Open, and I couldn't do double unders. And then right out of the gate, it was that workout where it's like double unders and cleans or something like that. And I was like, God, good Lord, how am I going to do that? I got through it. My score was terrible, but it was awesome. It was like I was so tired but it was like you meet your maker, and then you say, okay, so instead of excuses, I have goals now, right? I'm like, okay, now I'm going to learn. I better learn those. I better learn how to do that. And it's a great test for the next time. And the other thing I like about it is I love being around all the people doing it. So at my gym, like so many gyms, everybody's just there like screaming and yelling and having fun and cheering each other on. And it's awesome. It's really fun. And so now last year I got my son to do it. So last year what I did is because I was where I was, and in coaching, I helped run it at our gym. So I was just like a facilitator, right? So Beau Teal is my head coach, trainer, owner, and everything like that. And he sets it all up and dials it all in. But then, of course, during it, he's pretty crazy busy. So I would be like MC or running it and, starting heats and stuff like that. And that was super fun. And then watching my son compete. And my wife, that was really fun because I could just be a cheerleader. Right. So that was awesome. Yeah. So I would come in and I would do the workouts. Last year I would come in and I would do the workouts early. So I would come in and, we'd get the gym all set up and I would do like a test run. And so I would do it kind of just to see how it was going to work and do it for fun. And then we'd get ready and the athletes would come in and do it and have their heats go. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was awesome.
a great goal to come back to then for this year. I think it's so important to have those goals, even if they're not, where you might want to be or where you were prior to your surgeries. Setting reasonable goals, I think, is so important.
I think it's really important. Like when I see people come in now, I was just coaching this girl yesterday, so I did the beginner series at our gym, and so I was coaching this girl yesterday, and she was like, I'm so weak, and I'm a vegan. And I was like, okay, that's fine, it's fine. But she weighs like 100 pounds, right? She's really small, and I was like, it's no problem. But if you do want to get stronger, I think you do need to eat a little bit more, and I'm going to just show you some things that you can practice at home too.
Yeah.
But it's cool, and I think she doesn't have excuses. Like, she's like, I want to get stronger, and I'm going to come.
Yeah.
I think what might be hard for her, I love what HQ is doing, and I just think that it's so awesome that people can come in and throw down. The open is getting a little bit tougher, though. Mm-hmm. And I think that the scaled categories are cool. I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. There are different sort of levels now, and that's kind of cool. I think they're evolving. Mm-hmm. But it is a little different than it was a few years back, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But very exciting. How else, or what activities do you hope you're going to get back to, or what do you plan on doing once you're all healed from the second surgery? Is there anything else, like outside of CrossFit? So
you mean what activities do I hope to do?
Yeah. Like getting back to skiing or climbing.
Outside of CrossFit?
Like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, like, a couple weekends ago, my wife and I climbed up this mountain nearby here, Camel's Hump.
Wow.
And that's one of the higher peaks in this area. So we're in Burlington, Vermont, right? And it's one of the peaks that you can see. There's, like, Camel's Hump, and then there's Mount Mansfield, and that's where Stowe is. Okay, if you know Stowe. And so we climbed it. She was like, hey, do you want to go up Camel's Hump on Sunday? And I said, yeah, that'd be awesome. And it was freezing cold. It was like crazy. So windy up there. So Julie, we go up. Oh my God. We get up there. It's like you think it's going to be a beautiful day.
Right.
The colors are out. The leaves are changing. We're like, yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm wearing like a T-shirt and a vest. I get up there. It is like, it felt like the wind was blowing like 60 miles an hour. It's totally gray. It's freezing. We're like, okay, we're good. And we went right back down. And, but that's a big hike. It's significant. And we did it. And that was the first time I'd been able to do it in years. Wow. So that was awesome.
That's amazing.
And then the other plans we have, are to, I did fall once, but that was not, it wasn't significant. I always fall. So my wife was like, yes, okay, that's going to happen probably a couple more times. And it did, but that was fine. So then, now we're thinking more about backcountry skiing again. Wow. So when we were younger, we did, like I said, a lot of some teleskiing. I like to teleski. And we would put skins on, and we would, skin up and hike up the mountain and then ski down. So we're planning on doing more of that. A buddy of mine was one of the original like pro snowboarders. Mm-hmm. So I'm 47. So he's around my age. So he was one of the OGs, right? Well, he still has contacts in the industry. So when I was getting ready for my surgery, it was so awesome. He shows up one day at the gym and he's like, dude, I got something for you. And I said, okay. And he brings out a brand new snowboard.
Wow.
He's like, no excuses now. Yeah, he's like, no excuses now, buddy. And so, yeah, he totally set me up. So I want to do that again because I haven't done that in a long time. Yeah, just stuff like that. I mean, just being able to go out and actually utilize the fitness that I'm gaining from CrossFit would be fantastic. It's a gift. It's a blessing.
Absolutely. It's true. We can spend all the hours in the gym we want, but I think the real joy is in using it outside the gym. So that's very exciting for you.
I think so. Like, I was listening to a couple of your podcasts, and I think it was it Steph the Hammer was talking about that the other day?
Probably.
It was like, she mentioned that, getting out and doing stuff. And I think there is something like I mentioned to you before about that outward bound experience that really changed me. And it's not that I've been like this perfect person. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but the experiences that resonate with me often have to do with being in the outdoors, being with nature. Mm-hmm. We're really close to the Adirondacks. When my kids were little, we'd go camping a lot. We'd do all these hikes over there. Mm-hmm. And just have these amazing sort of moments together. And my wife wants to do she's really big into that. She loves hiking, and so she wants to hit all the peaks over there. You can get in sort of this club, right? You get a pin for each one you do, and it's this little thing. But yeah, it's like, all right, let's do it. I'll do it. Now I can.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Okay. Well, I want to end with 3 questions I ask everyone on the podcast. So you might have heard them before. But the first one is 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health.
Yep. So this is a hard question because I think there are actually 4. I was thinking about it earlier today. So I was listening to this other podcast of yours.
You can you can sneak a 4th in if you need to.
Yeah, the 4th will be like the platform, right? The background. So I was thinking, like, I like to get up early, so I get up about 5 o'clock every morning. Like, my day starts at school around 7:20. So I like to get up at 5, which is, for some people, isn't super early, but for others, it's pretty early. So I get up at 5, so I have an hour just to myself. So I get up, hit the coffee, feed the dog, and then I just read. And that's really, I think, important. It's like, it sort of grounds me, settles me. And the reading can be whatever. It can be like pleasure reading or research. Sometimes I'll read training articles. I'll read training books, or sometimes I'll be reading like literature. And that I share, like when my kids do reading for school, I usually read or reread the books that they read because I'm an English teacher, and that's really fun for me. So it's just that time where I have to myself and I can kind of choose. So that's one thing. I think another thing would be working out, obviously, right? So I go to the gym every day, except for Sunday, and the way I like to think about that now is, people talk about rest days and things like that, and I think that's all fine. That's sort of a personal exploration, but I need to go every day. And I was listening to, I think one of the old school, I think one of Coach Glassman's original athletes, and I can't remember which of those it was, and he was saying the way that he programs now, I think he's out in California, the way that he programs now and the way that he thinks now, as he's kind of in his 50s, is that he's there every day, but he doesn't go 100% every day.
Okay.
And so he kind of looks at the workouts, and he programs this for his clients too, because a lot of people now, they go to CrossFit every day. And sometimes people go like twice a day because they want to be like a games athlete, whether they're going to be or not. Right? It's like, oh, what's so-and-so doing? I'll do that. But I don't know. I think that's too much for me. And so what I do is I like to go every day, and then I see what I can do. And some days I know I can go super hard. Like today I was racing my son. So I was like, I just went super hard. And then for the next part of it, we did a strength piece, and then we did half Cindy. So we did 10 minutes of, pull-ups, push-ups, and squats. And then my buddy Max is standing there looking at me, and then he puts on a weight vest, and so I put on a weight vest, and like we're getting ready for Murph that we're going to do pretty soon at my box. And so I'm like, okay, let's do that. So today would be one of those days where it's more competitive, but other days it would be like pretty chill. I'll still go, but I may be like, okay, it's practice day. I want to make sure I get this movement right. Maybe the weights are a little lighter. So go to the gym every day. And then the other thing I do, I was thinking about this a lot, was although I like this other answer somebody gave on your podcast about being nice to their spouse. I thought that was a really good answer, and so I've been thinking about that. But I cook. So I cook a lot of the meals for our family. And I think all those years ago, my daughter was diagnosed when she was 7 as a type 1 diabetic. Okay. And that really changed my perspective on things, nutritionally and just in life. And I spent 1 year as a stay-at-home dad too, where I just wanted to spend more time with my kids. And so I took a year off from teaching. I took like a sabbatical. And during that year, I did all the shopping and all the cooking. And I think I kind of kept that up since then. That was when they were little. And so I think we eat pretty good food, and I think that's really important. So I get up early. I make sure that I work out every day, and then I cook. But the other thing that I really do is I think it's super important to stay close with your family. Like for me, that's just like, that's my rock. If I didn't have my family,
nothing else matters.
No, it really doesn't. It doesn't. That's
so
it.
Important. I love it.
Yep.
All right. One thing that you think would have a big impact on your health, but you have a hard time implementing it.
I drink way too much coffee. It's like I have known that for a long time, but I just love it. And
Like, how much coffee are we talking?
Like right now, these days, I would say at least 5 cups a day.
All right.
There was a point that it was 8 to 10.
Okay.
And that was way too much. And so I got down to a place, I'm not really ashamed of it or apologetic. It just it feels like a lot when I talk to other people. And like people know that I drink a lot of coffee, you know, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you should see Mendenhall, you know." He's like I told you, like I chaperoned that Washington D.C. trip, and you know, I'm always stopping off somewhere to get a coffee. It's a little bit crazy, but yeah, I just love it. So there was a point about I don't know, 6 months ago or so, we did a challenge at the gym, and I got it down to 2 cups a day.
All right.
And that was okay. I just felt very slow.
Yeah.
I just felt very slow.
Not quite like operating at your 5 to 8 cups.
No. And so I think
I wouldn't say I used to drink a lot, but I might have like 1 or 2 cups a day. And just this past month, I decided to go no coffee just to like kind of reset. And the first few days were very rough. I felt like I was. How did that go? I felt like I was not even present. Like my head was up in the clouds or something. But after that, I actually feel like I can think so much more clearly, and I feel like I don't really need it. But I just love it. I know I'll go back to drinking it because it's so delicious. But for me, sometimes it helps to once in a while cut it out. But
yeah, no, I think that's very true. I think that's very sane and sound advice. Yes.
But we all have our things, and coffee is not the worst thing.
Right.
All right, last question. What does a healthy life look like to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one earlier too. In my life, I've been really lucky. You know, like we're talking about all these different things, and I've had these needs, but I'm really just a really lucky individual. So I have my health, you know, I'm able to work with these. I mean, first of all, I have good health care, and so I was able to get this done. And I have this like amazing family that supports me, and I hope that I support them. I have a good community of people at the gym. I'm fortunate enough to work with decent people in my school, and so I feel like a healthy life, you know, is accepting those things and acknowledging that, you know, I'm lucky. Like I have kind of a blessed existence in many ways. Like I'm never going to make like a ton of money or anything, and I don't really think I need to. But I think what I need to do is maintain that health. I think that's a responsibility, and then to give back. I think like a healthy life incorporates more than just it's more than just working out and eating right and doing all that. I think that's important. You have to give back, so you have to like do good in the world, and I think that's really important. I think it's important for your own health. I find like if I'm trying to help other people, not just like fix them. I'm not talking about like, oh, there's something wrong with you and I need you to do this.
Right.
I'm talking about just like being there to help people in whatever capacity. So that's important. And when you give, I think you get back so much more, and that begets health, mental health, you know, and it's like that. It's like you pass it on. So I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I love it. Perfect way to end. Thank you so much for sharing all of your story and for being so awesome and coming on the podcast. I'm super excited to share this with the audience. I think they're going to learn a lot from it.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I really enjoyed getting to know David, and I love his perspective on living with his orthopedic injuries and refusing to allow them to control his life. It was so neat to see how CrossFit allowed him to gain some more functionality and extend the time until he needed to undergo his total knee replacements. and also how it helped him to rehab after those surgeries and get back to doing the things he loved, like being outdoors, going hiking, and going skiing with his family. So I hope you guys learned as much from him as I did, and thanks again for listening. To make sure you never miss an episode and to receive exclusive content from me, head to my website, juliefoucher.com, where you can subscribe to my email list. Also, don't forget to share your stories. If you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please email me at info@juliefoucher.com. I'll choose some of these inspiring stories to share here on the podcast in future episodes. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe and consider giving the podcast a 5-star rating on iTunes. Also, don't forget you can train with me by visiting beyondthewhiteboard.com/juliefoucher. I always love hearing your feedback, so please leave comments under this post on my website, juliefoucher.com, and share your thoughts on social media with the hashtag JFHealth. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on Pursuing Health.